Welcome, everyone, to the NFL Week 11 prop show here on RJ Bell's Dream Preview. I'm your host, Munaf Manji, here for another week of NFL prop betting. Week 11 here's upon us. Recording here right before we kick off Thursday night football between the Commanders and the Eagles. That should be a good one, but we got a lot of great matchups here on the NFL Week 11 card here as far as matchups go. But joining me today here on this prop show, I've got my guy here with me. It's Steve Reider, fresh off of his vacation. Steve, how's it going, my man?
Munaf, it was great, man. Got away to the Dominican Republic. It was great to get away for a little bit. The grind did not stop. I was betting down there. It doesn't matter where it is. There's offshore books and there's PPH shops. So obviously had to stay away from the domestics. But we did all right last week and feeling pretty good. Excited about this week.
Yeah, it should be a fun week here. Like I mentioned, Sleepy had something come up last minute, so he wasn't able to join us here tonight. So hopefully we get the band back together for week 12. But Steve, not a lot of big picture stuff. I know we usually talk about something or another going on around the league here, as far as, you know, we obviously went past the trade deadline, but no significant injuries. I know Dak is going to be gone for the rest of the season. It just makes a lot of sense for their season is pretty much over. But other than that, nothing has really stuck out to me. Anything that's caught your eye here over the past couple of weeks as far as NFL?
Yeah, as far as storylines, player storylines, not as much. Obviously, there's some great content with just the games themselves. Obviously, the
Sure.
Chiefs and the Bills coming up, I think, is going to be super exciting game there. So really, mostly it's just kind of the games and how we're handicapping them at this point.
Yeah, I think like at this point now for sure we know the contenders from the pretenders here as far as when it comes to sides and totals and things like that here. But we'll keep it churning here for our player props here. Of course, you guys know how we do it. We'll give you 4 player props each. We'll talk about the Monday night football game, of course, get you guys a promo code for pregame.com. And of course, we'll wrap up the show with our player prop best bet for the Monday night football game as well there. So without further ado, Steve, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it, my friend. Let's lead it off here with our quarterback props. I'll let you lead it off. Where are you taking us?
Yeah, I'm actually taking a page from the Dream podcast for pregame. If you haven't listened to it, it's fantastic this week. But I'm going Will Levis interception minus 145. And this is a quarterback that takes chances. He's not good. We've seen that before. No matter who's behind center for this team, they haven't had much success. Will Levis is the younger player right now, so they're giving him an opportunity. He's going to take some chances, and with those chances, he's thrown a lot of interceptions. In fact, he's thrown an interception in 5 of the 6 games that he's played in so far this season, and he's averaging over an interception per game. Now, the team that he's actually playing, the Minnesota Vikings, they lead the league in interceptions at 15 so far this season. And so much of that has everything to do with Brian Flores' scheme. It's complicated. It's confusing. The more mature quarterbacks that have been around a long time can kind of process the game a little bit quicker and kind of see what Brian Flores is doing. But, you know, I've talked about this a lot on almost every podcast I've done throughout the season is he's a problem for opposing offenses. And I know kind of it slipped a little bit the last couple of weeks here, but he's a type of schemer that confuses the quarterbacks pre-snap, and then they see a different look on the back end of it. And there's so many quarterbacks that have come throughout his games against the Vikings and talked about how difficult it is to go against Brian Flores. So I think with a quarterback that is a neophyte, a young quarterback that makes a lot of mistakes going against this Vikings team that leads the league in interceptions, I don't know why we wouldn't expect more of the same. So you're laying a lot of big here at minus 145, but ultimately I think Will Levis will throw an interception, and I intend to get paid on that.
Every single quarterback has thrown an interception against the Vikings this season, except for Jared Goff back in week 7. But even last week with Mac Jones that started there for Trevor Lawrence, 2 picks. We had 3 picks each from, I believe that was, Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers threw 3 as well. So this defense, like you mentioned, is a problem. And Brian Flores does a fantastic job of scheming up against these quarterbacks as well. So if it's not broke, like we say, don't try to fix it here. So I think we'll continue here with the Will Levis interception prop in this game. All right, for my player prop, quarterback prop, I should say here, Steve. I'm going to go over to the Falcons and the Denver Broncos game. I'm looking at the home quarterback in this one, Bo Nix, to go over 211 passing yards in this game. This number opened up 207.5. I jumped on it immediately, but I like this all the way up to 221.5. And first, let's take a look at this Falcons pass defense. They've been really struggling over the last 3 games. They've allowed 280 passing yards per game in the last 3 weeks, which is a third most. And we take a look at Bo Nix, right? He's gone over this projection of 211.5 and for the last 5 games and 3 straight games overall for the Denver Broncos. And his 4 home games this season as well. Nix has thrown for at least 208 or more passing yards in 3 of those 4 games. The lone game he finished up with 206 passing yards against the Las Vegas Raiders. So we also take a look at this Falcons defense on the road, right? It hasn't traveled very well. They've allowed, I should say, 3 of the 4 quarterbacks to go over this projection here as well. The only quarterback that didn't get over this number was Jalen Hurts. And I believe that was all the way back a few weeks ago between those 2 teams there. But Bo Nix seems like he's getting better every single week. I think Sean Payton trusts him more and more as he's getting more reps, more playing time under his belt. I think him and Cortland Sutton have really developed that rapport over the past several weeks there as well. And again, we know this Falcons offense can put up points. So I think that if they are trailing in this game at some point, or if it does turn into a little bit of a shootout, I think that Bo Nix can definitely keep up, at least with the passing yards in this game here, Steve. So quarterback prop for me this week, I'm going to go Bo Nix over 211.5 passing yards.
Yeah, I like it. When you have a rookie quarterback, you intend that they would start off slow, and as the season progresses, kind of figure some things out. And you see on his trend line with these passing yards, he has certainly gotten better, and his QBR has gotten better as this year has progressed. Yep. You also are playing in Atlanta, which is a dome, so the weather is not a factor in this one. So I certainly endorse this play.
All right, let's keep it rolling here. Let's get over to our running back props for this week. Steve, what do you have?
Yeah, I talked about this yesterday on a pod, and Jonathan Taylor over rushing yards. And it's interesting kind of to see what has happened since I gave it out. I give it out at over 85.5, and some spots it's up to 89. At other spots, it's down to 81.5. So obviously we're going to shop around here and hit the over 81.5 rushing yards. Jonathan Taylor has hit at least 88 yards in 3 of 4 games with Richardson. He's averaging 5 yards per carry. In 4 of his last 6 games, he's eclipsed 100 rushing yards. Now, he's going against a New York Jets team that is allowing the 11th most rushing yards per game, but they're 7th in rush EPA allowed, 7th worst in rush EPA allowed. This is the type of game that I think that the Colts are going to try to establish the run on the ground, because I think that's their avenue to success. They like to run it and then basically come off play action and throw something deep down the field with Richardson. I think Richardson's ability to also run the ball, especially with that RPO action, I think is going to be a huge effect here. Is he going to keep the ball? Is he going to throw the ball? Is he going to hand the ball off to Richardson? That's confuses defenses. If you've watched the Jets this season, their defensive line has been blown up continuously. There seems to be a several yards that they get moved off the line of scrimmage at the snap. So I don't really suspect any reason why it would be anything different here. So I bet and like Jonathan Taylor over 81.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, he's been really good over the last, I guess we could say for the last 5 games. I know he struggled a little bit against Minnesota, but again, who's not struggling against that rush defense like we talked about? But I mean, last week you mentioned against the Bills, 114 rushing yards on 21 attempts. The key part of it for him is that he's getting the rush attempts, right? Over the last 5 games, he's had at least 20 or more rush attempts, and I think that's just equating him to get over his rushing yards number. Anthony Richardson's also back under center, right? And I think that they want to do everything to protect him, maybe not make mistakes. And how do you do that, right? Get the running game going, let him build off of that to have success in the passing game. And what better way to do that with a guy like Jonathan Taylor in the backfield there for you? So yeah, definitely co-sign this play. I have him on a couple of my fantasy teams, so hopefully it is a big week for Jonathan Taylor this week. Steve, we usually give out the square play of the week, and I think I'll take the crown on that for this week. But I just couldn't get away from CMC this week. His rushing yards to go over the number of 79.5. This number did come out down a little bit. It opened up at 81.5, but I do see a 79.5 right now, currently over on DraftKings. But last week we saw the return of CMC and didn't have a great game rushing the football. 13 attempts, 39 yards against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have pretty historically over the past several seasons have been a pretty good rush defense. But he was very effective out of the backfield there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? He did have 6 receptions on 68 receiving yards there. But we take a look at the Seattle Seahawks rushing defense, and it has been struggling mightily the course of the season. They're allowing 5.05 yards per carry. Teams are averaging close to 25 attempts per contest as far as rush attempts goes. They're giving up 123 yards per game on the ground. Are the Seattle Seahawks there? And historically, CMC has been really good against the Seahawks team, and he has played them in his career on 5 separate occasions. 3 of those 5 games have been with the San Francisco 49ers team. And in those 3 games, Steve, he's rushed for 100 or more in all 3 of those games. 108 back in the 2022 season. Then last season in 2 matchups, 19 rush attempts, 114 yards. And then the December 10th game last season as well, 16 attempts, 145 yards for Christian McCaffrey. And he's averaging 6 yards per carry against the Seattle Seahawks team in his career. So I think we'll see again CMC get his touches from the backfield. I mean, he almost looked like last week he picked up right where he left off last season. I know he had a little bit of rust to shake off because he missed the first 9 weeks for the San Francisco 49ers team. But I do expect him to have a big week here in a big NFC West matchup. And what better way for the Niners to win this game to rely on your best offensive player in Christian McCaffrey. So Christian McCaffrey over 79.5 rushing yards here, Steve.
Coming off the injury, you expect some rust, and certainly there was some last week. But he actually looked decent. I know the numbers don't say that, but he actually looked better than I expected. He's got no tread on the tires, or he has a ton of tread on the tires because he hasn't played right now. I don't know what the expression is. Whatever the expression means that he still has a lot of life left on those tires, that's the one I'm looking for. But Christian McCaffrey, man, he's good. He's awesome. Yeah. His history against Seattle speaks for itself, like you mentioned. I fully expect him to look great this week. There's a lot of weapons for the Niners, and that just opens things up for him underneath. I fully expect CMC to have a huge game this weekend.
All right, so those are our running back props for this week. Let's move over to wide receiver props for this week. Steve, lead us off. What do you got?
Yeah, if your play is not the square play of the week, maybe this is. Travis Kelsey over 6.5 receptions. He hit this in 3 of the last games and 5 of his last 6. People are going to say, oh, DeAndre Hopkins is there now. But take a look at the 3 games with D-Hop. Kelsey's been targeted 40 times.
Yeah.
Historically, the Bills have played Kelsey well. In fact, he only hit this number 1 time in the 7 games against this team. But the linebackers that are there that usually cover him are actually injured and out for the Bills. So I think he's going to have his fair share of opportunity over the middle of the field. And Kelsey is that breaking case of emergency player for KC. And this is the type of game that they want to use him. I expect it to be highly competitive. I think he's going to be used early and often. He is the safety blanket for Kelsey. I don't know how many yards he's going to get, but I think he's going to get a ton of targets at minimum. Receptions at minimum 7 receptions in this game. Give me Travis Kelsey over 6.5 receptions.
Couldn't talk you off. He leads the league over the last 3 weeks in targets, like you mentioned, 40 total. Jamar Chase is at 39 in that span as well. CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors there as well. So I think that, again, this is going to be a fun matchup, as it always is, between the Chiefs and the Bills. And like you mentioned, the numbers just speak for themselves right now. And Travis Kelsey, I know got off to a slow start at the beginning of the season, but when we talk about a type of receiver like DeAndre Hopkins coming over to the Chiefs, I think obviously you have to pay attention to a guy like that, which opens up opportunities for a guy like Travis Kelsey there. And I think we've seen that over the last 3 weeks here. He's had at least 12 targets over the last 3 weeks for the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. So I think that does continue this week for Travis Kelsey. So couldn't talk you off of that. All right, for my wide receiver prop for this week here, Steve, I'm going to that same game we talked about earlier between the Vikings and the Tennessee Titans. And I'm looking at Calvin Ridley in this game to go over his receiving yards of number of 55.5 right now. And, speaking of DeAndre Hopkins, since the Titans traded him, Ridley has clearly became their number 1 target for the Titans. And in the 3 games since the trade of DeAndre Hopkins, Ridley has a total of 32 targets over the last 3 weeks. We just talked about Travis Kelsey being number 1. Calvin Ridley in that span, he has the 5th most targets in the league over the last 3 weeks. He's in pretty elite company in that span as well, right? Talked about Kelsey. I mentioned Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Malik Neighbors to round out the top 5 guys. And over the last 3 weeks, Calvin Ridley has exceeded this projection of 56 receiving yards. He's caught 72 or more yards in the last 3 games for the Tennessee Titans. The Vikings are also allowing the 3rd most receiving yards this season to the wide receiver position. And we talked about how great the rush defense has been. Well, Will Levis is going to have to throw the football. So I think that, number 1, that interception is going to be there. But again, if they are trailing in this game, they're going to have to throw the football. And I think that Calvin Ridley is definitely going to be the beneficiary of that. Last note here, Steve, one wide receiver has gone over this projection every single week, except for last week. The Jaguars didn't have a receiver to that, but prior to the first 9 weeks, at least one wide receiver that the Minnesota Vikings have faced has gone over this number of 55 and a half. So I love Calvin Ridley this week. Give me the over 55 and a half receiving yards for Ridley.
Yeah, I think they're going to be throwing it. They're going to have to, right?
Yep.
They're not going to be able to run the ball. And if that's the case, who you're going to throw it to? Your best receiver, maybe the only one left really on the roster that you can depend on. So he's going to get a ton of looks. I fully endorse the play. I mean, you talk about the target share alone is fantastic. So give me Ridley over.
All right, let's get over to the last player prop here for week 11. Player prop number 4, Steve. Where are you taking us?
I am going Audric Estime over 57 and a half rushing yards. Listen, he's now the featured back over there. In fact, last week he was 14 of 17 carries. He had 82% of the running back carries for that team. He went for only 53 yards against a KC team that's finished 4th in rush EPA allowed. So last week, I understand it was only 14 for 53 yards, but that KC rush defense is fantastic. He now plays Atlanta, a below average run against the run. They're allowing the 12th most rushing yards per game, which is 129 yards per game. And I think also looking at the game itself and handicapping it, Denver's a small favorite. So if this is a close contest, there's no reason to suspect that they would abandon the run. So I think the game script also favors us here. And I'm not sure if the market really has taken account to how good Audric Estime is. I think that he's going to have a coming out party in this game. Give me over 57 and a half rushing yards.
Yeah, it seems like this game may have a low key opportunity to turn into a little bit of a shootout. But again, like you mentioned, Denver Broncos are favored in this game at home against the Atlanta Falcons here. So I do think that there's going to be a big opportunity for him to continue building on what he did last week for this Denver Broncos team. And Javonte Williams just really hasn't panned out for the Denver Broncos yet. I mean, he's at his spots, but I think they're looking for some consistency in that backfield for the Denver Broncos. All right, I'll round it out here with my tight end prop for this week. I'm going to go with Jonnu Smith of the Miami Dolphins over 32 and a half receiving yards. And this goes back a little period ago where Mike McDaniel said that the Dolphins offense needed to get Jonnu Smith involved a little bit more in the passing game. And they've done exactly that, right? Over the last 5 weeks, Smith is averaging 6 targets per game. He's at least 45 receiving yards, and for the last 5 games as well. When we take a look at the Raiders defense, right, which has been atrocious this season to say the least, but over the last 2 games, especially against the tight end position, the Raiders are allowing 110 receiving yards to that tight end position. Smith's had 16 targets at least as well over the last 3 weeks, which is tied with Tyreek Hill on that Dolphins offense as far as targets go. And I think that they'll continue finding Jonnu Smith in the offense here of over 32, or sorry, in this offense here. So I do like Jonnu Smith to continue to be involved in this passing game for the Miami Dolphins here, Steve. So I'm going to go Jonnu Smith over 32 and a half receiving yards. That's my last player prop.
Yeah, I bet his under last week, and he looked pretty good, man. I got to be honest. If they start targeting him, he's a weapon out of the receiving corps. So it's tough for me to push back on this one.
All right, before we do get over to Monday Night Football between the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys, let me just remind everybody about pregame.com. A lot of hot handicappers putting in the work. We have a lot of sports going on right now. Of course, the NFL, college football, college basketball is underway, the NBA season, of course, NHL. So a lot of great things happening right now and a lot of hot handicappers. And right now, if you do go over to pregame.com, make sure you guys get over to Steve and buy his picks package. Make sure you guys use that promo code SPIKE15. That's SPIKE15, SPIKE15. You'll get $15 off of anything for listeners of this NFL pod. Of course, it's good for 7 days from this podcast release. So again, make sure you guys use that promo code SPIKE15, $15 off of anything for listeners of this podcast over at pregame.com. All right, Steve, let's get over to the Monday Night Football game between the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys, or what's left of the Dallas Cowboys, I should say. But Could have been a really good matchup if, again, both, or at least I should say, if the Cowboys were healthy. Obviously, we talked about no Dak Prescott for the rest of the season. I know that CeeDee Lamb has been dealing with an injury there as well. Um, but right now, as it stands, we have the Houston Texans as a 7.5 point road favorite here with a total of 42. And last week, we saw the Philadelphia Eagles just annihilate this Dallas Cowboys team. Cooper Rush, the backup quarterback there for the Dallas Cowboys, just looked lost out there, Steve. They just didn't have any type of offense out there. Not sure if that's going to improve this week going up against this Houston Texans defense. The good news for the Texans is that they do expect to get Nico Collins back. I know he was a little bit limited in practice this week, but he does get that extra day because they are playing on Monday Night Football here. But what are your thoughts on this game between the Texans and the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about from a handicapping perspective, you have to look at teasing the Houston Texans down, and it's interesting because these advantage teasers are typically the way to look, right, to get through 7-3. But one of the areas that's not great is road favorites, so that always gives me a little bit pause here. But it's tough for me to look at the Dallas Cowboys right now and seeing everything that's going on with them without Dak Prescott, with the problems with even the stadium. I mean, literally, things are going wrong when people are complaining about the stadium. So I think this season is lost for the Cowboys. I think they recognize it. I think they recognize it in the locker room. So I'm not really sure how much fight or we're going to get from this team. I'm not even sure how much talent they have on the offensive side of the ball. They don't have much of a running game to speak of, Dallas. That is, they're going to give the ball to Rico Dowdle, who will be their number one option in that running game. And they have Cooper Rush throwing the ball. So what is there to get excited from an offensive perspective? So for me, I could only look to Houston, and I have teased them down multiple times this week. And I think there's some player prop opportunities. I did play Dowdle over 47.5 when that news came out. I'm not sure what it's up to right now. But I think there's another running back that we're looking at with this game right now. Are you okay with me jumping right into that, Munaf?
Jump into it. Player prop best
All
bet
right.
Monday Night Football.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about it beforehand. I did not play it until we started talking pre-production here. But Joe Mixon over 85.5 rushing yards. And there's a lot to be excited here. Just pulling up the Dallas Cowboys stats right now. They've given up 5 different rushing yards, over 180 rushing yards so far this season in their 9 games. That's 5 over 180. There's not really much of a backfield besides Joe Mixon for the Texans. And frankly, if we expect them to win the game and by 7.5 point spread, you imagine this game might not be even close. You imagine they're going to run the ball quite frequently right now. And I think that the emergence of Nico Collins and his coming back to this team is only going to open things up underneath for this running game. Joe Mixon's stats have been fantastic this season. He's gone over 100 yards in 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 7 games so far this season. And, last week he played Detroit, and Detroit held him to 46 yards on 1.8 yards per carry, but he still had 25 attempts. So this is a guy that's getting a ton of opportunities right now. And if you take a look at Detroit versus Dallas, Detroit is about 5, I believe, in rushing allowed EPA allowed per play. And Dallas is dead last in that statistic, and it's not relatively close. So we have a Dallas team that is I don't even want to say not good against the runner, is absolutely putrid against the run. We have a running back that gets a lot of carries, the lion's share of carries in that backfield, and frankly has found a ton of success so far this year. And a game state that should be Houston favored by a fair amount here and should have a lead throughout. There's not a whole lot of reason not to back Joe Mixon right now. So I did bet over 85.5 rushing yards, Joe Mixon.
Yeah, agree with everything that you're saying there. I think this should be a big game again for Joe Mixon coming off of what transpired last weekend. And we talked about it. The Lions defense has been really good against the run over the course of the season, at least. And I think DJ Reader there has made a huge difference for that Lions rush defense. But we take a look at this Houston Texans team, right? They should be getting Nico Collins back. But again, right now, the focal point of the offense has been Joe Mixon. And Steve laid out the numbers. I'm not going to regurgitate everything because they speak for themselves. But the one thing that also sticks out about Joe Mixon is that we know he's going to get the rush attempts there as well. The backup right now in Dameon Pierce, he also is dealing with an injury, was limited in practice thus far this week, is officially listed as questionable for this game. But I do think this is a bounce back spot here for Joe Mixon. And then let's not forget, even with him only having 46 rushing yards last week, he still got 25 attempts last week for this Texans team. And 3 out of the last 4 weeks, he's had at least 25 attempts for this Texans rushing attack there. So co-sign this 100%. We'll get back on the winning track here after dropping our last 2 player prop best bets. But I have full faith in this one. So we're going to go Joe Mixon over 85.5 rushing yards as our player prop best bet to round out week 11 and get back on the winning side of things. All right, that is going to do it here for this edition of the NFL Prop Show on RJ Bell's Dream Preview. Steve, anything else you want to mention, my man, before we get out of here?
Now, looking forward to it. I have complained previously about the schedule makers. I'm going to just take 5 seconds here to complain again. You have the Bills and Chiefs on a 4:00 game. What are we doing here? I mean, and I know we talked about it, and I think there's money-making opportunities here in the betting market for Houston and Dallas, but who the hell wants to watch Houston and Dallas on primetime television? Give us a second game at least. If you're going to do anything, flex the Kansas City-Buffalo game. We got to figure out ways to get the best teams on TV by themselves so we don't have distraction. Really a poor job by the NFL right now. They're all about making money and all this kind of stuff. Put Casey in Buffalo, you're going to smash some records for the regular season games.
I mean, even if it was Baltimore and Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football, that would have been a fun one to watch as well. But at least the games that we do have on Sunday, at least some of these games could have been flexed either on even Sunday Night Football, like Bengals Chargers. All right, it's a pretty good matchup, but I mean, like you mentioned, we have Chiefs Bills, we have Steelers Ravens. At least we do get Thursday Night Football with Commanders and the Eagles there, so that should be a fun one.
Off momentarily.
Well. Yep. All right, that's going to do it here for this edition of the NFL Week 11 Prop Show. Again, make sure you guys get over there, pregame.com. Use that promo code SPIKE15. Get you $15 off of anything over on pregame.com. And we'll be back next week, hopefully talking about some more winners that we did find for NFL Week 11. Till then, good luck with your bets, and we'll talk to you guys down the road.